as the issues and problems come at you, it's like logs or rocks in the river, and you do your best to maneuver out of the way. Some of these things cannot necessarily be stopped. When people talk about, for example, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, that happens on the Biden's watch, not Trump's watch. You can explain the Russian invasion of Ukraine under a Trump presidency very easily. If the Russians thought that the war was going to be over in a week, then what America did didn't really matter all that much. We send them weapons, well, they're going to be gone in a week anyway. We send them planes, well, they're going to be gone in a week. Unless America directly puts troops on the ground, which, I mean, from Trump, the semi-isolationist guy who held up Ukraine aid for political favors, like, is that a message being sent of strength and deterrence, that he cares so much about this that he's willing to put it at risk so he can get dirt on the son of his political opponent? I don't know if that projects deterrence. Right. And so the idea that if this crisis came down under Trump's term, he could have stopped it, I find that ridiculous. I find that silly. I don't think he has the diplomatic skill to do it, and I just think the log hadn't shown up yet. I think there could have been completely other different reasons. I think it's a very America-centric worldview to think something's going wrong in the world, it's the president's fault. Sometimes those things happen outside of the control of the United States. Other people in other countries, believe it or not, do have autonomy.
That's what I've heard. I've heard they have agency. But actually on this point, because this is the thing I hear a lot when Biden and Trump are compared with respect to foreign policy. That's probably the single biggest point that I hear from Trump supporters. Our mutual buddy Rob Noor uses this one a lot. And what's funny is the thing I respond with is, okay, you telling me a thing did or did not happen on a president's watch. We don't have to say Trump. It could be Obama, it could be Biden, it could be any president, good or bad. I'm not going to give the president credit or the blame for that unless I can tie that event directly to an action or inaction. So, for example, there was a solar eclipse recently under President Biden's administration. That Biden didn't cause that, right? Just because it happened on his watch doesn't mean shit. I know the deep state's powerful. You're right. It's entirely possible. But also there was an eclipse on Trump's watch too.
It's the
Trump
true
did not
dark
cause
Brandon.
the eclipse.
Sorry. Okay. Continue.
No, the double dark Brandon, because it was a double eclipse. Or no, it was a total solar eclipse. I'm sorry. But so that's my position. Like, listen, if you want me to give a president credit, or you want me to blame a president for something that happens on their watch, you need to show me what they did or didn't do, which contributed to it. So the thing I hear is, okay, there were no, Russia did not invade Ukraine on Trump's watch. He did on Biden's watch. And, of course, he, oh, my God, what was the name of it? Was it the Donbass? Was it in 2014 under President Obama?
The Russians invaded Crimea, and Donetsk and Luhansk, which make up the Donbass. Yeah,
okay, so there you go. So it's like, okay, Democrat, he invades. Another Democrat, he invades, but not under this particular Republican. So I guess my question is, for me, the obvious thing is, number one, you need to show me what he did to deter Putin. And they'll just say, well, he was like crazy and intimidating. I'm like, yeah, but I need something specific. So then they'll say he sanctioned the shit out of Russia. I've read conflicting reports, like our sanctions under Trump weren't shit as far as like hitting Putin.
There were sanctions, but when, like, the sanctions, were they around Ukraine, or what were the sanctions around? Were the sanctions like, if you would do this in Ukraine, we're going to sanction you more. If you do this in Ukraine, we're going to sanction you more. Like, if we sanction the Chinese for, like, theft of American IP,
intellectual property,
does that necessarily mean that they're going to use that as an indication of our deterrence on an invasion of Taiwan? Like, I don't necessarily take that way. It's the same reason, like, people talk about America's deterrence breaking in if we pull out of Ukraine, and I do think that's going to happen, because if we can't foot the bill to keep Ukraine up and in this fight and to try to push them towards victory, then it's kind of hard to think that America would actually put their men and women of the armed forces at risk for an island like Taiwan. It does have a real demonstrative effect on deterrence, but a government could argue that, well, we didn't care as much about Ukraine. We do care about Taiwan. Here's us verbalizing that commitment, and we're going to dedicate 20, 30, 40 billion dollars in aid to Taiwan to show that commitment, that we're taking action to that commitment. There's so many different ways that you can try to pull and tug on deterrence, but under this logic, then that would mean that World War II was a failure of deterrence for FDR, when it could have been that the Germans and the Japanese had their own interests that, due to just the course that they were taking under their ideological view of the world, under their state's interests, was inevitably going to crash within the American iceberg and American interests and our allies and what we supported and what we cared about in the world. That there were, once they had taken a certain route, They eventually bombed Pearl Harbor. Was that a failure of American deterrence? What was that a cause of? And I just think that we simplify it to this happened under the presidency, therefore it's the president's fault. He did it.
All right.
But it's a big world. There's many forces at play. There's many motivations. Like, for example, was Saddam's invasion of Kuwait George Sr.'s fault? Or was it that he had economic issues that he rapidly wanted to deal with, and it got worse and worse and worse, and so he looked for a quick solution, and there was Kuwait.
Right, and it's an unfalsifiable counterfactual, right? Like we'd just be speculating, but to me, to your point, yeah, you need to prove something concrete. Plus, the other thing is, what about these other arguments, which I like too, which is, to the extent that Trump's behavior may have influenced Putin's timeline, maybe Putin thought that waiting to invade Ukraine, or perhaps he might not feel that he needed to invade Ukraine if Trump had been elected to a second term because of damage that Trump would have done to NATO. Or, I mean, again, you're much more of an expert on this stuff than me. How long was the buildup, like in terms of like armaments and training
it was
and recruitment?
From late 2021 to early 2024. Recruitment less because they didn't think they needed to recruit anybody. They thought they could just kind of wander in the country and everybody would, throw flowers and kind of go, ah. They thought it would be short. They didn't think it would be this much of an endeavor. But the thing that scared me the most is when they started getting the front line. That means blood that they could do blood transfers with, because that's not done with training operations. Once that's done, to me and to a lot of other people, that indicated, oh snap, there seems to be real either planning for something or real attempt to make it look like they're planning for something. And it turns out that they were planning for something. But yeah, it was months. It was months. Some people try to, for example, say that the pullout of Afghanistan, and I know this is something I heard Mitch McConnell, and I think it was, what's the 90-year-old senator? What was his name? He's not
Chuck Grassley.
Chuck Grassley said something similar to this, that the pullout from Afghanistan or weakness on Afghanistan made the Russians think that we would be unwilling to stick our neck out for. I think that the last decade of American policy in Ukraine made the Russians think we weren't going to do anything. I think that us not doing really much of anything when they invaded Crimea, or when they invaded Donetsk, or when they invaded Luhansk, or when they invaded all the times past that, secretly, that we know they did because there's photos of it, there's video of it. But I think all of that behavior is what led them to believe that, which was a failure of the Obama, Trump, and, in my opinion, somewhat the Biden administration. I think it was a multi-administration failure on judging what the Russians believed, what their interests were. I don't think, played into enough account that the Russian government genuinely believes that Ukraine can only exist as an extension of Russia.
Yeah, so I'll say this too, because Afghanistan, I mean, honestly, even though we don't talk about it quite as often as we did, Afghanistan was a turning point for the Biden administration, because that was when that was the point his popularity dropped and has never recovered since. It was been on a downhill trajectory ever since.
Who would have thought that the point would be pulling out of Afghanistan would be the point?
Listen, I'll die on this hill. This is like the one area of foreign policy where I hyperfixate on, because it also bleeds into electoral politics, which is more my area of expertise anyway, to the extent that I have any expertise, which is, to me, especially years out, right? It's been 2 years, 3 years almost. I feel like, because Piers Morgan, Destiny's been on Piers Morgan a lot lately, and that to me, it's Piers Morgan frustrates me so much for a lot of reasons, because I think when he's at his best, he's pretty good on like moderating debates and interviewing. But when it comes to like domestic politics and how he grades Biden,
I don't know. I don't think he gave crackhead Barney a fair enough shake.
I honestly haven't watched that thing, because like I saw that and I'm like, what the fuck is this? And I skipped it past. So
she starts foaming at the mouth, quite literally, at one point. It's not great.
So it's not very substantive then.
No.
Well, neither is his analysis, in my opinion, of what happened in Afghanistan, because these motherfuckers, I think, okay, so everybody forgets that it was actually Trump who inked the deal, the Doha Agreement, with the Taliban. We have a special inspector general's report which reviewed the collapse of Afghanistan. They identified that decision by Trump as the single most important decision as to why Afghanistan collapsed. Not that there weren't other reasons which meaningfully contributed, but if you had to pick the big one, it was Trump inking the deal with the Taliban, cutting the Afghan government out, and basically just making it a matter of time. Trump did that in
I have
2020.
fear of him doing the same thing in Ukraine, which is he sits down with the Russians, make a deal, give this deal to the Ukrainians. You don't accept it, then bye. You're cut off.